We begin in Beijing, where the 19th National Congress of the Chinese Communist Party has concluded. The week-long political event has come out with various new decisions on the future of the country. A new Central Committee, which is the CPC's highest body, has also been elected.
同意的代表请举手。
A final approval to a new CPC Central Committee and a new Central Commission for Discipline Inspection. Delegates to the Congress also passed resolutions on the report of the 18th CPC Central Committee, the work report of the Central Commission for Discipline Inspection, and an amendment to the CPC Constitution.
中国共产党第19次全国代表大会
The agenda of the 19th CPC National Congress is completed today. The report of the 18th Central Committee, approved by the Congress, established the goal of deciding to build a moderately prosperous society in an all-round way and open a new journey of building a modern socialist country.
新征程的目标
Delivering a report at last week's opening session, General Secretary Xi Jinping outlined a two-step approach to build China into a great modern socialist country after the completion of building a moderately prosperous society by 2020. He also said that China is at a critical moment in history as socialism with Chinese characteristics has entered a new era.
全面建成小康社会
This is our strategic vision for developing socialism with Chinese characteristics in the new era. Finish building a moderately prosperous society in all respects, proceed to achieving modernization, and then move on to turn China into a great modern socialist country in every dimension.
社会主义现代化新征程的壮丽篇章
On the sidelines of the National Congress, 6 news conferences and 8 group interviews were held, covering almost every aspect of China's development, from politics to the economy and social affairs to the military. At those events, not only were questions taken from both Chinese and foreign media, but achievements were also introduced and serious commitments made. Moreover, for the very first time in history, a delegate corridor allowed delegates from various industries and sectors to take questions from the media before entering the official venue. And this has improved interaction between the delegates and media and helped to diversify coverage of the event. The members of the Standing Committee of the new CPC Central Committee's Political Bureau are expected to meet the Chinese and foreign journalists on Wednesday morning.
A lot of political jargons, a lot of slogans, a lot of plans, a lot of new terminologies. How to understand the 19th CPC National Congress? I'm lucky to be joined by 2 experts in Beijing. We have Teng Jianqun, Director of the American Studies Department at the China Institute of International Studies. Welcome, sir. And also we would like to welcome in Washington, D.C., Dr. Cheng Li, Director and Senior Fellow at the Thornton China Center of the Brookings Institution. Welcome, Dr. Li. Let me begin with you.
Thank you.
One of the abstract terminology is the Xi Jinping thought on socialism with Chinese characteristics for a new era. This has been the phrase that has been adding to the party constitution. How should we understand, particularly for our audience from all over the world, what exactly is that about? Dr. Li, your thoughts?
Well, as the name explains itself, there are 3 components, very important components. First, about the new era. It's very clear that China enters a new era with China's ever-growing power. And China already moved to the center stage of global affairs with economic development, climate change, and also security issues with nuclear non-proliferation, anti-terrorism, and United Nations peacekeeping, and etc. So China's role it has changed, and so this is a new era. But also domestically, you see the emerging of the middle class and dealing with more social and issues, and certainly it's a new era. And secondly, it's China wants to pursue the development model not based on Western style or any other country. Of course, China can learn from other countries. Actually, China didn't learn from many other countries. But China wanted to develop its own development path, which emphasizes more balance and development as the key word that in Xi Jinping's speech. And still, it's unbalanced and inadequate. So how to improve this balance? This is reflects Chinese characteristics. And I think that China already showed its economic development model. It's quite durable, but also wanted to combine some other changes in other domains. And finally, about Xi Jinping. Now, of course, that this emphasized the core position of Xi Jinping. Now, this is to a certain extent is follow Deng Xiaoping. What Deng Xiaoping said, each generation should have a core, and without that, sometimes it will be fragmented leadership. So, of course, this is not so much about going back to strongman politics, but rather to have a strong leader to unite the party together. This is exactly what happened in the 19th Party Congress.
Very comprehensive interpretation for us, Dr. Li. Thank you so much. On the other hand, though, Mr. Teng, you see different reactions coming from all over the world. Mr. Xi Jinping, in his report delivered as the General Secretary of the CPC Central Committee, he has been very strong in his tones. So many are wondering whether this is going to have the implication of China being ever more assertive, particularly internationally. What do you think?
I don't think this is a assertive attitude toward the world. I'd like to use the phrase pragmatic, confident in dealing with the issues in our world. For example, the economic issue, the security issue in our neighboring countries and also in the world. So I think President Xi Jinping, or Party Secretary General Xi Jinping, is very confident in dealing with these issues and gave a very clear-cut explanation on his policy toward this issue. So this is a very important part for us to understand the, you mentioned the amendment of our party's constitution.
Well, I think one of the things to understand is to have examples and case studies. You got 3 case studies all at the same time. Okay, there's South China Sea, where Mr. Xi has been talking about nobody could have ever the capability and the power to, make China give up any of its territorial integrity. He said it very clearly. Secondly, there is the DPRK nuclear issue, which is a regional security, and certainly it's about China's history with a neighboring country like the DPRK, North Korea. And thirdly, you also have the upcoming visit by President Donald Trump of the United States, his first ever state visit to China. Certainly that's going to help us understand China's position in terms of this big power so-called relations. Mr. Teng, do you think there is something that would help us to understand exactly what this is all about?
Yeah, I think there is a fundamental change for China's policy toward that outside world, especially in recent 5 years. For example, we used to have ideology-oriented policy.
That was during the Cold War era.
During the Cold War time, especially since the founding of PRC.
Whoever is a socialist country or a so-called communist country.
When Deng Xiaoping took power, he adopted a trade-oriented. So we, made a lot of money by the trade with other countries. And now, I think especially from 2012, the president, the party secretary general, and the leaders in China attach great importance to the security, to the integrity of our territory, and to the security of the public. And if you, read newspapers or watch TV, you can find a lot of, effort by our diplomats all over the world. Each year, 1 million Chinese will go abroad for sightseeing, to business, and so I think this is a very important era for the Chinese people, for China.
Dr. Li, do you agree with Mr. Cheng talking about, we have moved to probably a new era in which diplomacy is very much related to security in many different forms, of course. Dr. Li.
Well, absolutely. That certainly does not mean that China, can ignore all the challenges. Actually, the report and delivered the first day of the Party Congress, Xi Jinping made it very clear. It is very uncertain, and in every moment, domestically, internationally, things could change. For example, in the nuclear proliferation in Korean Peninsula is a major challenge. But also China is surrounded by countries with some territory disputes. how to resolve them in a peaceful way is very, very important, and how to maintain good relationship with the United States to avoid what the scholars call the Thucydides trap, which is the emerging power and the existing power could not have any relation other than conflictual. This is old way of thinking. So therefore, that from Xi Jinping's perspective, from Chinese leadership perspective, despite some disputes, China wanted to have a good relationship with United States. This is what they call the new era of major power relations. So basically it refers to United States, but also China wants to engage with dialogue with other countries, including Japan and certainly Russia, India, etc. So again, the challenges are real, but China still, to a certain extent, misunderstood by the outside world. So how to express to the outside world China's rise will not be at the other countries' expense is itself as a major challenge. I want to see that how Xi Jinping and his new team more effectively communicate to the outside world.
One of the things that is going to be a test is whether the country's diplomacy or international relations is based on, in any way, ideologies. Mr. Teng, you probably could help us understand better about that. When it comes to policies toward the DPRK, for example, is China going to think about, oh, that is a country who claims itself as so-called a socialistic country? Will China use that as one of the reasons as to how to draw up that plan to deal with DPRK nuclear issue, or that factor is not going to be relevant in the overall plan? Mr. Teng, help us to understand.
You're right. I think ideology is still a very important element in the relations between China and other countries, for example, between Chinese Communist Party and the Labour Party in DPRK. I think the two parties today still maintain very good relations for the exchanges. But I don't think this is the key element in the relation between the two countries, especially since the country started its open up the reform in early 1980s, and China established its relations with ROK. And so I think China changed a little bit in its foreign policy and tried to maintain a balanced relations between China and the ROK and between China and DPRK. So this is a big change. I'm sure in the future China will adopt a very balanced relations among major powers and among its neighboring countries.
What about with the United States, Dr. Li? I do want to invite your thoughts on that. I mean, on the one hand, China could do all the things as it considers important to avoid any Thucydides trap, as you mentioned. But on the other hand, the perceptions others have about China is not a product of China alone, but rather an interaction between the countries. So what can China do when the United States is thinking rather negatively about China's rise? Will this upcoming visit be able to help us under the clues of how future is likely to be shaped? Dr. Li.
Well, first of all, I want to go back to the early question about ideology. I do not think that China has ideology wanted to challenge the United States or defeat capitalism or whatever they call. And also, it's not appropriate to think that China and North Korea are the same. No, they're different. And North Korea is one of the totalitarian regimes remain in the world. But China, through Deng Xiaoping's reform, already changed fundamentally over the past 3 decades. Now, China, also from the United States perspective, yes, we have some differences with China. We may not like some way that the Chinese run the government, but we do not see China as an ideological threat to the United States per se. And actually, we in many most important issues actually have shared common interest. Economic stability and prosperity in the world. If China economy experience serious problems, that the United States also will suffer, and vice versa. And also in security areas, nuclear non-proliferation is shared interest, anti-terrorism, and also to a certain extent, cyber space security is also very, very important. So not to mention about the climate change and global peacekeeping. So we should emphasize our shared interests. This is also Xi Jinping mentioned in his speech. And I think Donald Trump's trip we should really highlight the common interests. Of course, that there will be differences, cultural and many others, but should not prevent the two countries cooperating in these crucial areas, especially very urgent areas about the nuclear non-proliferation in Korean Peninsula, and also trade issues, to make sure the U.S.-China economic relation will be win-win.
Okay. At this point, there is another question that is extremely important to all of us. That is, what is likely to be the way forward? We talk about the overall international policies, but there is also the issue of how China is going to structure itself to move forward. Dr. Cheng, I want to go to you very briefly. You see the Central Committee, the members of it, more than 200 of them, have been elected already. This is one of the most important things related to the conclusion of the 19th Party Congress. So, just for our international viewers, what this Central Committee is for, it is supposed to be some of the most leading figures of the Chinese Communist Party. They're being combined into this committee, and eventually they're going to make big decisions, the biggest probably decisions, for the Chinese Communist Party. And Chinese Communist Party is the ruling party, of course, of China. So you see that significance. Mr. Teng, what's your impression of the members of the Central Committee, particularly the new ones that are coming into this one?
Yeah, there are more than 120 new members in CPC committee, and I think this is a very encouraging signal to the outside world. They are young, they're very educated, they're very experienced. For example, most of them, have the experience, at various levels of the governance. For example, from the county, from the province, and also from the state. So I think they are very strong, in governance, in domestic affairs, and also in international affairs. So this is encouraging news for the Chinese people, and I'm sure they will give very good governance of the country, and also will play a very important role in international affairs.
All right, they are quite experienced, that is for sure. We see, Dr. Li, the post-50s generation, 60s generation, and there is even a few the post-70s generation. This is quite a combination if you think about the background that these people grow up with when China is experiencing some of the most dramatic changes it has ever seen in history. What is your impression about all of those names in that Central Committee?
Well, actually, the number of Central Committee members is 204, and plus 171 alternate members, they are together 377. Certainly, these are very, very important figures. If we want to have a political future, you should belong to that club. And many of them serve as Mr. Teng said, the provincial level leaders. And as we know, that the provinces in China is just equivalent to European nation states. For example, Guangdong and Jiangsu and Shandong, their population actually is about 100 million. And their GDP growth also ranks them as the global top 30, or even in Guangdong's case, top 15, equivalent to Mexico. So these are the major players, and many of them have a strong economic leadership experience. This is new, and also some of them receive their education abroad, like Beijing Mayor Cheng Li and many others, and some of them serve as provincial chiefs, some of them serve as ministers. So we'll see a new group of people, and also very importantly, they all apply for the age requirements and the term limits, and without exception. This is again to reflect the institutional norm and regulation is still quite effective. Not like someone said that these norms and regulations are not relevant. But I think this is a continuation of China's political institutionalization. We should welcome that development. And we certainly hope that these major players could really move China forward and in various areas.
Just follow up, Dr. Li, you've been following Chinese contemporary politics for decades and know the nuances. Tomorrow, there's going to be the names of the Politburo Standing Committee being announced. So a lot of expectation as to where is China going to be, where is it going as a result of the names to be announced tomorrow. What is your expectation? What are some of the messages you are looking for?
Well, certainly I hope that will be more representative from the different regions and the different experiences, complement each other, and also that it's not so much about winner take all, but I hope that we'll see what the Western call the team of rivals, and what the Chinese call the 五湖四海, come from 5 lakes and 4 rivers, have broader representation that can uplift the public confidence. The main message is the capable leadership, especially on the economic front, but also in some other areas, including to improve the party building. And collectively, they should show the world that China's leadership is united together. And so that is very, very important. Of course, we still do not know the composition of the 7 members of standing committee, assume it's 7, and also the Power Bureau. But I think that especially those who work in the economic area, their previous experience will be very, very important for Chinese public and also for the outside world.
Mr. Teng, you see during the 19th Party Congress very clearly indicated there is an ultimate contradiction that needs to be addressed. That is the increasing demand of the public for better life. And according to Xi Jinping, the General Secretary of the Chinese Communist Party Central Committee, he said a few words after that: democracy, rule of law, security, fairness, equality, environment, and so on. These are the key words that he mentioned immediately after he talked about the so-called major contradictions that the country needs to do. And another contradiction is of course, the imbalanced and inadequate development this country is still having. How do you think the leadership for the Central Committee and possibly very soon in the future, we know the Politburo members, their names and their backgrounds, going to help us to understand this, whether China will be able to solve that contradiction?
Yeah, I think the most important part for this Congress is to give a clear-cut roadmap for the future of China. For example, according to the reports during the Congress, you can read the significant implications from various aspects. For example, the military reform, the political reform, and economic reform. And of course, all the reforms will give a very important implication to the improvement of social life. You mentioned the contradiction, the new contradiction we are facing now, the requirement for better life of the public. So I think the reform, for example, the military reform just gave a very important foundation or set up a good example for future reforms in China, including political reform and economic reform, and even the cultural reform. So I think this is a very encouraging roadmap for China, as we have already seen from these reports.
Okay. Dr. Li, what about that? You see Dr. Teng in Beijing keep on emphasizing about the military reform, and you also heard through the report that it is very clear the party is going to lead the country in all walks of life, in every spheres. What do you say about that? What is likely that work together with a moderately prosperous society in which the Chinese people certainly are progressing together with the society as well?
Well, first of all, that the military reform you just mentioned is very, very important. Certainly that the Chinese party leadership want to make sure that the military under the control of the civilian leadership, and should also to clean up the widely spread corruption, which was the case in the past few years. So you do see that the 90% of the delegates from the military and the armed police to the 19th Party Congress are first-timers, are new. And also, I just conducted research about the Central Committee composition. Most of these new members of the Central Committee are also the first-timers. So that certainly gives the image of the new blood and also cleanness, and to a certain extent. But also, at the same time, that China's emphasis is on the prosperity and more harmonious development, especially to first reduce poverty and to expand the and also not only just economic growth, but also more balanced development. Talk about the environment protection, talk about the inclusiveness and the social justice. These issues, I think, should be also addressed. So the previous model, which emphasized, single-minded emphasized GDP growth, it come to end. So now we see the new model, and I hope that China can really deliver to the public and to uplift public confidence about the future of China's development. Of course, there's a lot of challenges. I don't want it to be to sound like everything is good, but the important thing is that this party Congress actually, whether it's deliver a good message and have a wonderful, good team, and so far, of course, ultimately I will see tomorrow the lineup of the Power Bureau Standing Committee and also the Power Bureau and member of the Secretary and also CMC, Central Military Commission. But based on the composition of the Central Committee, because all of the top leaders come from that pool, it's actually quite encouraging.
Many people are saying very similar things. To see those names in the Central Committee, many of them have very much grounded experiences in their decades working in China, certainly give a positive message. But for now, I have to bid goodbye to the two of you, but thank you so much, both of you, for your insights and your analysis, particularly for our international viewers. Thank you, really appreciate it. We have Cheng Li, Teng Jianqun. Thank you for being with us.